So we're live.
All right.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's John,
And I'm Fisher.
and today we're going to be talking about Demon Slayer, about Elemental Samurai, and about kind of how to adapt these things into your tabletop game and how we did it for Master's Tale. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about Demon Slayer, not so much like here's the main characters and story, but here's kind of what we're adapting and what we were looking at trying to put together.
If you've
Um,
never heard about it before, if you don't
right.
know what it's about, we'll give you
Sure.
a brief synopsis in
Well,
general terms.
and even if you already know it, just kind of looking at it from a game design perspective, I think kind of frames the story in a new way. So, Demon Slayer is essentially a world full of demons that are very close to vampires, right? That's kind of a crossover that seems to happen in a lot of anime, where if you take the blood of this great and powerful demon named Muzan, then you become a demon, and that gives you various sets of powers. You aren't able to go out in the sunlight. You have a healing factor, and you have a blood art that allows you special powers utilizing your blood and magic.
You're
So,
also weak to hysteria for whatever reason.
right, you have a strange plant-based weakness. So, Wisteria is your garlic, your blood demon art is your vampire powers, and you can't go out in the sunlight. So it's basically just Japanese vampire things. And then you have a group of demon slayers who are these samurai-esque characters in a world with guns, right? I forget often how modern this show is.
Yeah,
Because I
it's
think it's
trains.
set.
I forget what era it's supposed to be set in, but it's set in a relatively modern era.
Yeah, like the turn of the 20th century, something like that. But
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, that's just something that every so often I remember because they have a character that uses guns that has been affectionately referred to as America breathing, as opposed to any of the other breathing styles, because he
Okay,
shoots a gun.
I didn't actually know that, but that's hilarious.
Yeah, it's very silly. But anyway, so they use their breathing arts to amplify their weapons with specialized techniques that mimic elemental abilities. So when adapting Demon Slayer, one of the big problems is how the anime was adapted from the manga. So when I'm looking at Demon Slayer, like, here's a thing about fire swordsmen, and this was where kind of the first problem with adapting Demon Slayer comes in, is they aren't really conjuring fire.
It's
They
all
aren't really
symbolism.
right. But if you watch the anime, like
It's let's set the record straight. It's a gorgeous anime. It looks really pretty. But yeah.
yeah, but this is
Now if they really were flinging around elemental fire, that would be cool. And I that's one of the major things I have with this show is I don't understand why they couldn't just do elements. I don't know why
yeah,
they had to I don't know why they had to science that away when they're legitimate. Again, the demons are also
there's straight up
scientific,
magic in the
technical,
world.
but there
Yeah,
is magic in this world. I don't understand why they were like, well, no, we can't actually have them throwing around a really cool spell with their sword. I don't
yeah,
really understand, but yeah,
yeah. It's a little bit silly. I think the other thing too is there's more represented on the screen through allegory than there is actual stuff happening. And so I think that that's one of the issues that you run into whenever you're trying to adapt Demon Slayer is, do I just make it a bunch of samurai moves? And you could, um, but I wouldn't. I would adapt what it looks like it's doing rather than adapting what the author technically says it is. For a couple of reasons. So, like, if you look at something like wind breathing from Demon Slayer, you are creating sword strikes so fast in the air that, according to the author's own words, you are creating gale force winds. The problem that I have with that is
you're
it
doing
is
it with a
less
really thin sword.
Right, like it's less realistic to have the like I would first believe that somebody had magic powers before I would believe that they swung a 4 millimeter thick katana fast enough to generate hurricane winds.
Hurricane force winds. That's
Mm.
really kind of silly. I didn't actually know this bit. That's really dumb. But there is
Yeah.
there's one weird thing with the ultimate type. I think it's sun breathing. That like is the ultimate type of breathing. That's
It's made
literally
to kill demons and
it's
they
made
can't
to
heal
kill
from it
demons.
because it's magic.
And
Yeah.
that was my immediate confusion because I didn't actually know when I first watched it. I didn't realize that it wasn't magic they were flinging
Right.
around
Well, exactly. And
until it's like I read about it. And it's like, wait, they're not actually doing that, but sun breathing is magic, but the
and
others aren't for some reason.
right. And the problem with the anime is that the anime does not help that because the anime acts as if they're actually making the things. Like Rengoku, when he uses flame breathing, burns the ground. And I heard an argument that he is discharging so much energy when he swings his sword that it's making the ground burn. And I'm just like, guys, you need
You
like
can
somebody.
just make it fire magic.
Right. It's
Like
more realistic if
okay.
it's fire magic than if he like do you like just I want to get a power scaler on this show because and I'm not that big into the power scaling anime community where they're like, this guy would beat this guy, every
City
third
level, yeah, blah
Sunday.
blah blah. Yep.
Right, but if you were just doing the calculation, like he draws his sword so fast that the ground around him catches fire. How fast is he drawing his sword? Because I'm sure there's a physics calculation for it,
Oh,
and
100%.
and then
So the
like yeah,
funny
it
the
just
funny
gets
thing
silly.
about well, the funny thing you have to realize is that the katana is not actually all that great of a sword. It
Oh
tends to
no,
be
the
idolized.
otakus are gonna come.
Hey, man, look at history. It's not all that amazing of a sword.
It's cool
Uh,
looking.
well, yeah, it's cool looking, but at the same time, there's a reason why double-sided swords were more common. There's a reason why that form of smithing and that form of sword was more common. There's a reason that not every single culture had a katana.
Yeah,
But why I'm saying that is that you know the mythology behind the katana. Can I say you played Elden Ring, Moonveil,
sure,
Rivers of Blood? Those katanas have stuff that is cool behind them.
sure.
I Can they actually do that? Look, Rivers of Blood looks like it's gonna fall apart. If you just look up that, but like that's the way I'm looking at katanas is that you can make the mythology behind it, but if you're going to like look how frayed that blade is, that looks
Yeah,
terrible. But the way I'm looking at it is that if you're going to have this kind of cool visual effect with the sword, go all out. It's a fantasy anime. You can do whatever you want. Now, that's not to say that the creator made a mistake not making them elemental or whatever in real life. But if you try and look, I'm bringing up midichlorians from Star Wars. If you put too much science in your fantasy, people get upset because it
right.
takes some of the magic out of it.
Sure. I mean, literally.
And yeah, no, literally. And you know, do I think that the Demon Slayer art is bad as far as the effects? No. I
The
think it's
comics aren't very
confused.
good though. The mangas are
No, no,
definitely not.
it's apparently not very good. I think the anime spent a lot of time and effort, or the studio spent a lot of time and effort with the visuals because other things were lacking. But and boy, they delivered. It's a gorgeous, but at the same time, I think it would have been much more interesting had they gone into, yeah, this is magic. We're using magic against vampires. I don't think anyone would have been upset.
Right.
I don't think anyone would have questioned it, really.
Right. Right. No, I think that's definitely true. So in adapting this, I would not look to adapt just samurai fighting styles because I don't like Rengoku uses kendo. Great. He's using magic fire kendo for the
Yeah,
sake
immediately
of
makes it way more interesting.
right, right. Like this image, knowing that no fire is actually happening in this image makes this image
That's
so
really
lame.
stupid. Oh my gosh. I never even thought about that way. But yeah, no. Like them flinching at the heat that doesn't exist.
Right. It's just
Like,
it's very silly.
well, in the same way, they use samurai forms, sword forms to simulate, you know, actual samurai sword forms within this anime and this manga. But when you look at, say, for Avatar, The Last Airbender,
Hmm.
they use actual martial arts to bend,
Sure.
like, I think it's
Well, yeah, it's four
northern
different
Shaolin Kung
martial
Fu
arts. Yeah.
that they
Yeah.
use for firebending, and these are real martial arts that they use, but they're attaching an element to it to where it actually kind of has a new kick to it, and no one questions it. No one says, "Oh, that's dumb." That's cool.
Right.
It's you still have the ability, you still have the physical ability, you still have the training necessary to move your body in a particular way to get an effect.
It was
You,
one of the things that ruined Korra in a lot of ways because they tried to go the route of mixed martial arts and they got rid of a lot of the unique movements for bending that
which is dumb because you
well,
took out the dance aspect. You took out the aspect that these two fighters are going at it in a dance.
right. Well, and the other thing too is whenever you look, so as somebody who actually practices boxing, people that practice mixed martial arts, because I don't practice mixed martial arts, I do strictly boxing, but I work with a lot of people that do mixed martial arts. One of the things that people will tell you is traditional martial arts are less effective, like logically, right? Because if you're doing mixed martial arts, you can you can use the best things from all the other systems. But if you're saying, hey, to perform these elemental magic moves, you need to use this system, then it gives you a reason to practice what I think is a more aesthetically pleasing martial art. For
Oh yeah.
instance, right. So if you're having to do these forward dropping sweep kicks like this one that looks like it sets a wave of fire going, yeah, in real martial arts you'd never use that move. But if your magic system works on, hey, these ancient sages or whatever have you figured out the best way to use martial arts to create these attacks and these are the movements they came up with, then it makes a lot of sense. And I think that that's one of the things that can often be ruined by just saying, "Oh, well, you know what? You never really needed the special techniques and poses. You can just kind of punch fire, and these are just these inefficient, dumb ways that random martial artists figure out how to do this."
And it all comes back to Naruto, unfortunately. They had the amazing thing with hand signs and
And then
how
they just get
quickly
rid of hand
the
signs.
Hokage is able to just fly through, like, I forget the number, but some stupid amount of hand signs in like a split second. The animation's gorgeous when he does it. And then they become just punch wizards. They're just, I'm going to throw a fireball at you. I don't care. And it takes some of the cool factor out of, it's sad almost because looking at it, it takes skill to be able to move your hands that way. It
Well,
takes skill to be able to use martial arts that way. It takes skill to be able to use sword forms that way. You take that out, what do you got? Well, you're a wizard from D&D.
sure. Well, and it used to be a stat. Like whenever they did the data books for Naruto, hand sign speed was a stat. Because if
Yeah.
you're looking at this, you have to perform 7 hand signs in quick succession to release this fire attack. So it's like, anyway, long story short, I think eliminating the elemental part of these sword strikes is silly, um, because it definitely takes away from your world, and it gives you a lot of questions, like there's a logical question that's asked in the show where it's like, okay, there's a guy with Nichiren bullets, right, in a gun. It's like a little sawed-off shotgun
Yeah.
thing. And it's cool, right? Because he blows holes in demons with the same metal that's used for demon slaying swords. But it's kind of like,
Why doesn't everyone use that?
yeah,
Or
yeah,
like,
there's
look, my biggest issue with the show. Well, I have a bunch of issues, but my
sure.
biggest issue with the concept of demon slayers,
All the Demon Slayer fans get on and just listen to us.
uh, not a come at me, but no, the thing, and people have said this before, the wisteria thing. Why on earth? Oh, I love this character. He should have been the main character,
Yeah,
unironically. But like the way I'm looking at it with the wisteria thing, he adds in wisteria into the show or into the manga and goes like, hey, by the way, demons are weak to this. And only one person uses it?
yeah,
Like
it is very
only one
strange.
breathing style uses it, and the excuse is, oh, she's a like unironically, this is the excuse they use. She's a girl, so she can't cut off their heads as well, so she has to use poison. And it's like, wow,
Yeah,
that's a little sexist.
there's definitely a lack of creativity. And I mean, I'm fine if you want to make a gender difference between your people, but the problem is that if you had the actual elemental power, then it would solve for
I'd
that
be using
problem.
wisteria. Why?
Well,
Why wouldn't you use wisteria?
right. Everybody's sword should be poisoned with wisteria at all times. But the other thing too is that, oh, she's a girl, so she's weaker. And it's like, yeah, I'm in actual combat sports. That's a real thing. But if you could actually produce magic flames, then maybe it would matter a lot less. But
The-
because you've like honed in your magic system to this is somebody physically hacking with a sword, which it's just anyway. So when we're adapting Demon Slayer, we're adapting the anime awesome visual and physical magic that I think is in the show. Like, because I'll tell you honestly, I've got a buddy who says I just ignore that. I imagine the show as it actually being magic powers because if I don't, I feel silly watching the show.
it honest to God makes the show better.
Right.
It
If you just
genuinely does.
if you don't listen to the uh the author.
If you look, word of God is a dangerous thing in fiction. I straight up, it kind of actually ruined Demon Slayer for me because I was thinking in terms of, you know, this is a magical system and it's not, but there's magic in
Did
the
we
world.
say something wrong on element? I'm 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 trying to figure out what this comment is.
Oh, hello. Welcome on in.
Yeah. um
You
yeah,
said the Demon Slayer fans are going to show up. I didn't think there was actually going to be any. Hi.
yeah, no, I think the oh, we're 5 minutes behind. Yeah, I'm on the other screen looking at the uh at the stuff as I'm putting it in. So anyway, so when talking about adapting Demon Slayer, I think the first thing that we would need to look at effectively is elemental sword abilities. So in Master's Tale, you have schools and disciplines, not like classes, right? So basically, you can take a character, they can travel around and learn from various masters and kind of hone together a semblance of a character. That being said, um, the the issue that I have with um, putting together those characters is that they're not completely random. There's normally kind of tent poles, right? So what we're going to use is the shoot on swordsman, who is like a samurai from the main book, and we're just building out the elements on that. And so we're going to use the 5 light elements from Master's Tale, which will be fire, water, wind, lightning, and ice. And then we've got a dark and a light sword that are still in the works. The other thing is that there were already a lot of elemental weapons, because this, of course, would be the 4th Master's Tale book. So we wanted to give the elements a different feel. And so I'll just kind of very basically explain the powers and how these kind of build on a dex-based swordsman character. And then you can feel free to chime in as you wish, and we'll just kind of lay out how we tried to put it together.
Indeed, indeed.
Yeah, just keep an eye on the on our comments so that we can make sure that we're looking at this, because I'm going to be looking at the other screen. Let's see.
Yes, sir.
All right. Okay, so the way that we did it was you have wands in Master's Tale, which have intelligence and dexterity based abilities. So what we wanted to do was say, okay, you have a shoot-on sword. Well, the hilt of your sword is a wand or an enchanted item that's placed into the hilt or at the base of the blade that then gives it an elemental effect, which means that you can technically use wand, magic staff, and talisman abilities with your sword. So this is our version of the magic sword. I take a fire wand, I break it down the gem out of the fire wand, or I carve the fire wand into the handle of the shoot-on sword, and now it becomes a fire sword, and I can channel my ki, which can already be turned into elements, as fire ki through the weapon, which I think is just a neat concept. So technically speaking, if you were part of the Harry Potter world, you could have a magic wand samurai sword, which I think is sick.
I'm sure some fan fiction has come up with that before, but
Yeah, well, right.
the interesting thing about ki is that it is elementless in other areas in the book, and
Right.
then elemented in, or element attached later on in the book in a tier 4, I think, elementalist.
Well, and wild magic uses ki. So
As
that
well,
one,
yeah.
yeah. So like that one allows you to like punch fire and things like that. So this just allows you to channel your ki into a blade. Now we balance the element of chi and ki. And the way that we distinguish that in the game is ki is your physical energy that can be kind of transformed, versus chi, which is your spiritual energy. So the shoot-on sword already uses chi. So what's cool about that is you're combining the element of body and the element of spirit in a single weapon that's a magic weapon to begin with. So mind, body, and spirit are found within the weapon and balanced, and that's kind of the lore behind creating these weapons, is the mind from the wand, the spirit, or the spirit or chi from the shoot-on sword, and then the ki from pouring your body's spiritual energy into it, create the balance that allows you these elemental effects.
Yeah.
And it very Eastern magic-y, it's not magic, but it's totally magic type of thing.
Yeah. And at the same time, you can look at it as very simply, I'm attaching whatever element I want to this blade, and I'm going to be expanding upon that element's usefulness to my, essentially, you can think about it in terms of magic, but you're not a wizard.
Right.
You're a battle wizard, but in more battle than wizard.
But I do like the idea too that you could frame this. So I think about, say, like the Watson from the more recent Sherlock Holmes films that has a sword in his cane, and Draco Malfoy's dad, Lucius Malfoy, is that it?
Yes,
He
indeed.
has a wand in his cane, and so the idea that you could style this as a, Secret Service military guy with a wand sword hidden away in his cane is kind of cool too. You don't have to style this as a samurai, but it's definitely leans that way for sure in the artwork.
Yeah. Well, you're also thinking of it as, like I said, battle wizard. That can take many different forms. The
Sure.
whole point of taking the element out of Demon Slayer is attaching it and saying, okay, well, I'm just a samurai and I have got a bunch of different sword forms that I'm using. Adding the element in gives it a new spin. And what Master's Tale would be doing is, yes, you can just do the basic elementless Chudon sword. It's good. I've made a few
It is.
characters that do use that. It's good. And you can use a bunch of other abilities with it. There's a few things you can build into it. It's good. It's cool. But at the same time, adding new elements in gives you new abilities and new ways to play around. You have the still martial ability of the sword itself, but now you have new things to add on to your own physical ability.
Right, because one of the things that we ran into was that Shudon Swordsman and Ninja were kind of always paired together, right? Because they're chi dexterity based schools that
Yep.
involve ninja can close distance and use throwing weapons, and then you can use your magic samurai sword. And it was kind of like, okay, cool, you've got a one and done 20 experience character that you could make 100 times, but this definitely gives them a new lease on life and allows them to
Well,
pair up with other schools in Master's Tale.
on top of the fact that the Chudon sword, I said there are things that can be built on top of the Chudon sword, and there is.
Yeah, the Moreto
But
blade, there's a couple of different things, true.
yeah, there are. Now, unfortunately, and I've made characters this way as well, and this is looking at it in a really simple way. Guy in Naruto is outmatched if he doesn't crack open the 8 gates.
Sure.
Just a basic swordsman is going to lose against someone flinging around meteors.
Right, right.
And
This
so,
definitely levels the playing field for sure.
indeed, and that's a good thing to have, I think, is that, yeah, if I'm running a samurai or if I've put my effort into being a really good swordsman, I want to be able to, fight some pretty nasty things with my skills. Buffing it with an element. Like, for example, there's a character that I've seen a couple times where it'll be the knight character,
Sure.
but it'll be building into elements later on, or like Crayblade from New West, or
Sure.
part, like just making their swords better, or making their lances better, or making
Yeah,
their
spirit
weapons
swords
better.
too. Yeah, yeah.
Spirit swords, like making
Sure.
their weapons and their shields able to actually handle fighting against things that aren't just random bandit number 462.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think I think that's definitely true, and I think that that's kind of what we're trying to put together here. But I'll go through some of the abilities, and then people can just kind of say, "Hey, this is how I would do it." But these each one has 5, 6 abilities that just allow the expansion of the dex and wisdom based, very uh, close tied shoot on swordsman to expand out. So you can create your flame gem, which I said is just breaking a fire wand into a gem and placing it in the sword, or turning the hilt of the sword or like turning a wand into the hilt of the sword, and it's a fire-based weapon. So what you do with this is, on top of getting wand abilities with your shoot on sword that you can use with dex or intelligence, you get the fanning flame dance, or the fanning flame shoot on sword. And what that allows you to do is, every time you hit a target, that target now takes d4 unmitigable fire damage per turn for 5 turns, and this can be compounded up to 6 d4 damage. So basically, every time you hit, they're now taking fire damage every turn. So most fire attacks in the game just give you a blasting uh, additional hit. It's burning your opponent with a fanning flame. So the longer you fight this fire-based swordsman, the more damage over time you're going to be taking, or the more damage per hit you're going to be taking. So that's the basics of the sword. Then you have your building flame roll. So this allows you to call on your rage and fury and aggression to build up a fiery power in your shoot on sword with your flame gem. So once you, as the user, have attempted 4 strikes in a single battle with the shoot-on sword, so you've hit, you've missed, whatever, you're swinging at your opponent, your sword starts to heat up, adding 2 additional damage to your shoot-on sword for each successive attack with it. Um, and this effect can be compounding. If you have Ravenous Speed from Berserker, which is
Yeah, I was about to say it's Mark of Over, isn't it?
yes, Mark of Olver. So the speed-based dex one. You can
Yep, I
add
think
this.
that would play right in.
Yeah, you can add this damage after the first strike you make. So basically, I make 1 strike, next strike is +2, next strike is +4, next strike is plus, on and on and on. And you can make 2 to 3 strikes with your shoot on sword a turn. So this really ramps up on top of the fact that the over berserker can already add +1 bleed per strike and +5 feet of movement each time you hit. So you're getting faster, dealing more bleed, dealing more damage. There's not a defense to this shoot on sword, unfortunately, but its offense is definitely extremely dangerous.
I mean, attach a few dodges to him and you'll be fine.
Sure, just don't get strength checked.
Twin step, serpentine dodge, or serpentine
Escape
run,
leap, escape
escape
leap,
leap.
dex
Yeah.
base escape for grapple. I
Yep.
would get this for this build in a heartbeat. Then you have Ancestral Rage. So in the Shoot On Sword, you have Ancestral Meditations, which is at the start of the day, you meditate for like 10 minutes and it allows you to commune with your ancestors and you gain their attributes. And so this one uses the Warrior Ancestor Meditation. And basically, the user's attack roll with the Shoot On Sword is increased by 1 each turn they attempt an attack. Um, it's also increases the user's damage by 5 bleed for each time they are picked up in combat. So whenever the user is dropped, like knocked out, or their health reaches 0, like Fighter's Heart, they add 5 bleed damage to their sword. This was something new that was like, hey, you get knocked down and you get back up with a warrior spirit and you keep fighting. And this is kind of like your back's against the wall and you just start taking out dudes with you, that type of thing.
Yeah. And it does play into that kind of last stand fantasy that a lot of people have.
Right. And because I liked with Rengoku, I'm not so much just going, hey, he has dragon powers, here's a bunch of dragon strikes, so much as he fought to the bitter end, against Akaza.
What would that look like?
Right. And so the mechanic would be you take a bunch of damage and you just keep dishing out. And the longer they fight you, the worse it is. Then he has his Breaker Flame Elbow. So this is a move built on the Shoot On Swordsman's Akori Elbow, which is basically a sidestep elbow from Kendo. And you deal an additional, for each attack the user has attempted, you add 1 damage to the Akori Elbow. The Akori Elbow is a secondary off turn. So you're basically dodging and striking with your elbow. And so even your off turn moves are amped by the longer you fight. And then finally, you have the Final Flame. And this is if you're not catatonic. So in Master's Tale, you have a 3 knockdown rule. You get knocked down once and you're picked up, that counts as you're knocked out. You get knocked down again, you're catatonic. And if you get hit while you're catatonic, you're dead. Right? So you can be knocked unconscious and basically hit twice after that by an opponent and that'll kill you. However, as you're knocked catatonic, so if you're knocked out and then picked back up, you have a final explosive sword swing that deals your sword swing plus all the damage you took during a fight in a fiery explosion. So you're going down, but they're coming with you, type of thing. And so you have a kind of last ditch sword strike that, kind of your junk rat, he's taken out, but he drops grenades, type of thing.
Hmm.
And so that's really all there was to fire because again, there's already all the shoot on swordsman movements and there's all the fire-based elemental things that you can add to your sword that we've already talked about So I really wanted this to feel like you're fighting a fanning flame that's growing stronger and stronger and refuses to go out. These guys are just dangerous, and you don't want to mess with them in a head-to-head fight for very long.
Yeah. And I think having fire be look, fire is almost stereotypically the basic element, on top of being stereotypically the most destructive element in
Right.
concept because it's
In
fire,
concept, because a lot of times fire doesn't do anything,
which is
unfortunately.
strange. But
Yeah.
in Master's Tale, fire is a pretty strong element that can be buffed by a lot of things. There's like 3 different types of flaming bullets. There's the all
Is
kinds
there
of
an ice
elemental fire
breathing?
that you can attach. I made a fire character at one point, and they used nothing but fire, and it was fire and metal actually, but it came out to be a really nice character.
Right. Oh yeah. No, I remember that character, and it was super powerful, super offensive and defensive at the same time.
Yep.
So there isn't an ice breathing. However, ice is one of the common light elements in Master's Tale. So Toshiro Hitsugaya is going to stand in for our ice samurai because there isn't one. But ice in most of the Master's Tale abilities just focuses on slowing until an opponent is frozen and then they're unable to move. And you can kind of have a second knockout win condition by slowing your opponent till they're frozen solid.
Yeah.
Um, so I wanted to do something a little bit different. There is going to be some slowing in this. But basically, the ice gem allows you all the same things. You can make a magic weapon out of your shoot on sword. Um, And so what the special ability though, it's called the Still Tundra Sword. And every time every attack that the user makes places a fragment in or on their target as long as they make melee contact with the target, whether or not it's technically a hit. So if you're crossing swords with this guy, you're getting these little fragments of water and ice on you every time you're blocking or getting hit. Then the user with a
Ooh.
primary move can flash freeze the fragments. For each fragment the user has in or on any number of targets, the user deals 2 unmitigable bleed damage and slows the target for 10 feet. So this is one of those that this swordsman clashes with you 5 or 6 times and then delivers 12 bleed and 60 feet of slowing in an instant freezing uh, primary move attack.
You know what? I think lock weapons would be really good with this as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that. Just attacks that get you to swing your sword a lot of times, even if it's just for a little bit of damage. Building this up is can be pretty devastating as a turn 3 or 4 KO move.
Ooh, wait, what's that one? Rapid strikes?
Yeah, you can use your sword as a primary and secondary for your main move. Um, but there's even some tertiaries with Moreto blades. You can end up attacking with a Moreto blade like 4 times a turn.
Yep.
So this one gets pretty out of hand pretty quick. You don't want to tangle with them. Then you have complete calm. The user gains an additional 15 feet of movement, so you're a little bit faster, and no longer makes noise while moving. So I like that stillness to ice as opposed to just being like, it freeze good.
Yeah.
um,
Now,
and
one thing I do have to say about the concept of these swords and elemental abilities attached to them.
sure.
Someone might say, oh, these are really strong. And yes, they are really strong. But at the same time, it's a sword.
Yeah.
Master's Tale is a world with guns,
Yes.
grenades, artillery, robot puppets.
Long
There
distance
are
magic.
long distance magic. You with a sword, you are at a disadvantage because you have to be right up next to the character to actually hit them. But with adding, like, it almost puts in its own balance.
Right. And you have to have mastered the shoot on swordsman before being able to use these abilities. So this would be a fairly advanced character.
Oh yeah,
Um, yeah, but going further, if you have slow chi, which is a ninja move, where if you stand still, you can avoid mental detection or life-based, like vital detection, you can use that while moving. And you're unable to be sensed by heat because you can cool your body and slow your internals. So it was like ice. Huh. It just freezes. Well, if you can freeze things, then you can lower your own body temperature. And if you can do that, then all of a sudden your heartbeat's slowed, your breathing slowed, your heat is not given off. I would dare say you probably have less even of a sense of smell, though it's not mentioned in the ability explicitly. There's a lot of things with ice that we were really trying to reimagine this as a frozen tundra assassin that I was glad came out the way that it came out.
I like the
Um,
idea of playing like the one scene I keep mentioning in Naruto, the Zabuza fight. The first big fight in Naruto, aside from, well, I guess you can't even say Mizuki's a big fight, but uh, is him putting mist all over the field and changing the battlefield to then attempt to silently kill people
sure,
within the field.
sure.
That's how I feel this blade kind of fits into the meta of I'm going to be silent and I'm going to change the battlefield just enough to make assassinating people that much easier for me.
Right. Well, and it'll go into that a little bit more with snow, but the next one is the snow rabbit walk, where if you have ancestral meditation thief ancestor, which is again the shoot on swordsman meditation, you become white as snow and you can re-enter stealth at the start of your main turn if you're on snow. And the user's movement on snow is increased by 10 feet. However, if you step off of snow, you come out of stealth. So what's cool about this is there's an ability in Tempest that allows you to create snowfall over a 300-foot by 300-foot area. Well, now your enemy needs to blast the ground with fire or get inside or whatever have you, because if you're in an open field, this dude's white as snow and invisible. Um, and I like that ever-present threat of these assassin-esque northern samurai where are they out somewhere in these woods as we're crunching on snow because they're completely silent as we move over? Snow is a fairly loud thing to move over a lot of times, or especially ice. Are they going to kill us? Are they not? And so it makes your enemies have an ever-present threat. And then, of course, you have your encroaching cold. So you focus cold magic on a target's body. So this adds 5 feet of slowing to each one of the user's attacks and 5 feet of slowing at the end of each turn, as long as the target is within 60 feet of the user. What I like about this is you could technically stealth walk around your target and slowly freeze them to death by just being in your presence.
Well, the funny thing about this is uh, the other freeze abilities we have in the game, such as null magic and certain other ones like
Yeah,
that.
wild magic ice, sure.
Yeah, now you could attach them to this build as well. If you're putting snow down on the field and your greatest benefit is keeping your enemies within the snow, it would be good to slow them so that they're stuck in the snow.
Right.
Then they can't leave that 300 by 300 foot area. So that's not to say that slowing is useless for this class. In fact, it would be very good. It would be a positive addition to it.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, this as far as it goes, this definitely builds with ice, but with a little bit of a different flavor.
Yeah.
And then your final ability, basically, if you're standing still, all of your stuff is like all of your internals are so slowed that you have advantage on intelligence checks, on detection against illusion and defensively against like forced intelligence check. You're also able to hear vital signs and detect heartbeats within 300 feet of you. Um, so basically, if you're just standing still, um, you can identify where people are, which definitely helps with the whole assassin vibe thing. This is definitely something though that I would think would be like we need to take a turn to set up the snowfield. We need to take a turn to find everybody by remaining still. This is definitely not a school that's run in and punch and kick and like the
No,
fire
this is
one,
a
which is
very
like,
patient swordsman, which,
sure,
look, the image of a white swordsman, like white robes, white cloth, standing in the snow with his sword drawn, just eyes closed in these wintry woods, waiting to see if he'll hear his prey. That's a great visual. Having this kind of cool thing your character can do. The concept of the schools in Master's Tale often have a visual element, an
sure,
easy visual element.
right,
To make it look, rule of cool adds a lot.
sure,
The very idea that I could be a stealthy samurai hiding out in the snow I've created to where my enemy won't know I'm coming until I know they're there and I can sneak up on them. That's
right,
cool.
yeah,
One strike.
right,
Like,
right,
that's cool.
or you've wounded them and they're trying to get away from you as they slowly freeze to death.
Yeah, that's cool. It's a cool visual. It's a cool thing that you can actually do.
Right. So then after that, we go into Crashing Thunder Dance. So there are lots of abilities that increase your movement speed using lightning. And I really wanted to create something very different with the lightning element here because if you're a shoot on swordsman, you can pick up storm running. You
It's
can
actually
pick
very
up
good with it.
right. You can pick up Aronian magic for a lightning-based sword that paralyzes, yada yada yada. Right. So I didn't want it just be like, hey, this is speed squared. Even though there are a couple of little speed moves in this, in the same way that with the ice one, there is some slowing. We're going to go a different direction with this. So let's go ahead and pull up our Zenitsu because he's going to be our thunder breathing, even though his breathing style has nothing to do with thunder. It's literally pure lightning and speed, but it's called thunder breathing. I don't know. I
Well, the
don't know.
concept of lightning and thunder is often kind of mangled in fiction, unfortunately. And even we kind of play around with the
Oh,
concept of
sure.
thunder and lightning because they are very attached. Thunder is just the after effect of lightning having hit something.
Right. So what we do with this is we have our crashing thunder shoot on sword, which again is a lightning wand or lightning magic object put into the hilt of the sword. And it allows you once every 4 turns to turn your attack into pure bleeding damage, right? So you can carve through things. Bleeding damage passes through armor, and it can't be healed traditionally mid combat, right? So your shoot on sword being able to transform into pure bleed is very effective as a kill move. The other thing that you can do, and I'm not going to read out this mechanic, I'm just going to kind of explain it, is you have Thunder Clone Dash. So basically, you have this primary move dash, you move forward 35 feet and strike your opponent. And then you create a Thunder Clone, like lightning, thunder follows lightning. And so your Thunder Clone can deal a 3 damage bleed attack that copies what your movement looks like. So this stormy version of you comes the following turn and strikes. The thing is, as a storm gets closer to you, thunder gets closer and closer behind lightning, right? Because, of course, sound doesn't travel as fast as light does. So, what you can do is, I could say, okay, I strike with my sword. In 3 turns, my thunder clone will hit. I strike with my sword the second turn. In 2 turns now, I set another clone. And then in the third turn, I strike with my sword and set it for next turn. Now, the fourth turn, 3 thunder clones strike you at the same time, which I think is just really cool. You can also, this is also technically a sound-based ability, and you can combine it if you know Sonic Clone Detonation and Sonic Blast Wave from Box Siren. You can detonate this clone into sound. So I think the idea of like it's kind of that cliche of the samurai strikes the dude, and then like 10 seconds later he falls. This just is you strike the dude, and then 10 seconds later, your thunder clone explodes and kills them.
Yep.
And there's just something very cliche and fun about
Oh,
that.
but it's cool.
Oh, yeah.
It is indeed cool.
And I would say Zenitsu is definitely the most fun to watch as far as just using his power, because it's so, like, just hype. Let's see, like, yeah, like trying to find the best image for it.
Unfortunately, I'm not a fan of the character, but
Oh gosh, no.
but his power is cool. The visuals are
Yeah.
really badass.
Yeah, no. There's definitely there's a lot of cool and fun visuals that he does. But anyway, so the other abilities that we put in there, Screaming Skydraw, it allows you to add your lightning key and transform your body into lightning for a fraction of a second, meaning that your primary move, you fly up and descend down, striking as a strike of lightning to hit your opponent, which I think is just fun.
Yeah.
It's done with your Batajitsu stance, which is your sword drawing stance, which is actually how Zenitsu does it in the anime, is he draws his sword in a single strike that's designed to kill you. The Screaming Sky Draw is just that, but you transform into lightning and come down on your opponent's head and kill them. However, you have to have at least 50 feet of room to do it above you, so this is more of an open sky strike than a
Or boss
cramped
room.
spaces.
You
Yeah.
you can't throw this out in a small hallway. At
Right.
least I would not suggest it. You might get a concussion.
Yeah. You don't want to slam into the roof as pure lightning. Then you have the Brooding Skies meditation, which is the ancestral meditation tracker ancestor, which allows you to see weak points in your opponent's body, and the user is capable, basically after 2 turns of combat, your accuracy is increased, so your roll to hit increases by 2 per turn, starting at the 3rd turn of battle. This effect is compounded by if you roll a natural 18, 19, or 20, you get another +2 to hit and another 3 bleed damage. So again, this kind of goes with the theme that these samurais tend to have, which is I'm fighting the ice one, he's slowly building frost on my body and flash freezing. I'm fighting the fire one, he's dealing more and more damage. I'm fighting the lightning one, he's getting more and more accurate. And this really reflects the fact that these are trained martial artists that are adapting to their opponent.
Indeed. I also like the idea that the closer lightning is, or the closer the storm is to higher objects that attract their attention, the more accurate their strikes are, because there will be more strikes aimed at that object. The whole myth of lightning never striking twice is indeed that a myth. So having a whole swordsman based on the concept of striking with lightning over and over and over again with more accuracy every time you do it is cool.
Right. No, I think it's definitely a fun concept. Then you have your Thundercrack striking bombs. So this is basically because this is lightning and sound, and there was the sound breathing in the show. This is basically your I throw the bomb and I strike it with my sword type of thing. Um, so you can throw a bomb, it deals 2 concussive damage, it can be thrown 35 feet. And if you strike it with your sword, you infuse it with lightning key, which increases its damage to 6 concussive. And then for any ability you have that makes you better at making bombs, it does more and more damage. So I definitely like this concept because Ninja is so good with throwing bomb weapons that if you build a shoot on swordsman into Ninja and then you just go to an engineer, pick up your explosive rounds ability or your basic combat explosives abilities, all of those
Insurrectionist,
abilities.
alchemist.
Right. All those abilities make this stronger. And so it encourages you to travel around and become an explosives master, which I think is kind of cool.
Indeed.
So that's lightning. And I don't know if you want to go through the other two or if we've kind of given an idea of how we're going to touch on this, because I know we're about an hour into this. And if
Well,
people are curious, we can definitely expand on this.
I think we should perhaps give it a break and look at
Sure.
the other two at a different time,
Yeah,
because we
yeah,
have gone
absolutely.
over quite a lot of content, and I think this will give people a good view into what we're working on and what's going to be added with new content to Master's Tale, and
Sure.
how we are not leaving behind things from the base book.
Right. Right. Exactly. I think this is definitely one of those. Land of Giants is designed to really fill out where everything is kind of lacking, um, rather than feel like an expansion onto itself with a bunch of brand new schools that don't necessarily interconnect. Most of the
This
schools are going to interconnect.
this is indeed the let's make everything fit better together to feel like this coherent. Now, not to say that Master's Tale doesn't already feel like a coherent world, but looking at it in concept of there are first there are the base book abilities right now that unfortunately fall by the wayside sometimes, not as often, but adding in new abilities that attach them to all three, it feels good to go through the expansions and to pick a new thing together that will ultimately culminate in a cooler class for yourself.
Right.
A character that you built, and that character might be built over however many people play the game and just discover it for themselves. Oh, that's cool. Wait a minute, if I like get explosives mastery from these three schools in the base book, and maybe, I don't know, make Cray weapon from New West, and go like keep going, like, or actually it's heavens and earth, but like keep going with your weapon, you never feel like, oh, I got left behind. My build got left behind. I should
Right.
have picked something else.
Well, and that's what some of these things are helpful for, because there is kind of this sense that if you live in a world of magic, you should probably use magic in some
Yeah,
way. Or if you live in a world with powers, you should probably use the powers. I mean,
especially
and it
because Master Tale magic is not that hard to actually learn.
right. Well, yeah, but it's also not like way overtuned,
Oh
right? So,
yeah,
like, your magic attacks are not significantly more powerful than, say like an elephant stampeding into a room, right? Like an elephant may hit as hard as, a fire-based attack because it's just a big brooding creature.
a a 10 XP wizard versus a 20 XP soldier. The soldier's gonna win.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, for certain. I mean, and we can get into technical builds, but yeah, I think the gist of it is, i- whenever you're adapting something like this, to me, I think the best way to go is to adapt it, one, in the coolest way possible, two, with your own original spin. I don't think you should just copy what it is, unless that's really what you're going for. Is I'm making a Demon Slayer,
Which you can do.
which you can do, yeah. Um, and I think three, not being afraid to expand upon the source material, right? Like you don't have to be held to, oh man, in Demon Slayer, they're really just like breathing correctly to fly at Mach 6. You know,
Which, well, in my mind, and let's settle it up pretty uh, succinctly. Don't be afraid to play into the fantastical. You should be wary of adding too much science to your fantasy.
right,
Everyone likes a good explanation, but not when that explanation undercuts what makes the concept fun. There is a
sure.
certain suspension of disbelief. It's something that was pointed out to me recently. And I don't, like, I'm sure someone's pointed it out before, but I had to, like, I'd never thought about it. The Millennium Falcon in Star Wars is a sci fi ship how would any one of them know what a falcon is?
Right.
But like, no one asks that question because it's not important. But when you're talking about Demon Slayer, the visual aspect of them using an element, which again, there is quite a lot. Look, let's go back to firebending. Firebending power, it comes from the breath. There is not like there is a precedent for breathing equaling power. There's quite a lot of that. Like
Sure, breath
so.
control, and what you're doing is you're expanding something that is a physical thing into a magical thing. Like breathing, as in boxing, is gigantic. Breath control
Oh
is
yeah.
probably breath control in your cardio, I would say is, with no exaggeration, is like 70% of the sport. I mean, that's why you see these boxers jogging for 5 to 7 miles at a time. And it's like, why are they doing that? It's like, because they need controlled breathing for long periods of time.
Oh, 100%. You're also thinking about how much oxygen is going to your blood.
Right.
Now, that's more a scientific. Now, I do find this kind of funny with Demon Slayer and in the consideration of breathing. Breathing, and this is going to wrap it up pretty nicely.
Sure.
Breathing, in and of itself, is the most mundane thing a person can do. Adding a functional magical effect elevates it to cool, elevates it to a technique. Taking that away just makes it feel like you learned how to breathe in rhythm. Cool. You went to a Zumba class. So
Right.
like I don't know that undercuts it so severely. So one last point: have fun with what you're making. Make it fun.
Sure.
If you undercut your fun with too much logic and too much science, you've undercut your fun.
Right.
Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great playlist to end off. Well, I'm John.
And I'm Fisher.
All right. We'll see you guys next time.
Mm-hmm.